Hi, everybody. This is Andrea, president of Stigma-Free Society. Hope everybody's doing well today on this Thursday. I'm very excited because we have an amazing guest, somebody who I really look up to and I feel has a lot of very important things to share today. So, Rebecca, welcome. Thank you for joining us on Stigma-Free Society. How are you?
I'm good, Andrea. I'm so happy to join you today. I know it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, definitely. We always make it work, and here we are connecting. So I think having you on the live is a great way for our stigma-free community and for myself to get to know you. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely happy to be here.
Nice. So what I'll do is just share your bio and let people know a little bit about you and the work that you do. So Rebecca Chartrand is Vice President of Indspire, correct?
Correct.
Just going to make sure I got it right. I was looking on LinkedIn. And for her bio, I just want to share Rebecca is a member of Pine Creek First Nation. And as I mentioned, Vice President of Programs and Student Success at Indspire. And Rebecca, we discussed this earlier that I was going to ask you to share a little bit about your ancestral roots, and perhaps you could just give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, so my traditional name is Wapanung Ikwe, Wabashke Maingandu Dem. I'm from Treaty 4 territory here in Manitoba, but I'm right now I'm positioned in Treaty 1 territory, so I'm located in Winnipeg. I identify as Anishinaabe, Innu, and Métis, and my pronouns are she and her.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I mentioned that was going to be very difficult for me to pronounce, and I really appreciate you taking that piece on in the bio. So a little bit more about Rebecca that I just wanted to mention. She is an exceptional purpose-driven leader, thoughtful and thorough, and as well a strong sense of pride and identity. Her previous role as division principal of Seven Oaks School Division in Winnipeg in Manitoba, Rebecca developed anti-racism and Indigenous education policy and strategy, which through careful implementation has made Seven Oaks a leader of both anti-racism and Indigenous education in Manitoba. She was also the driver behind the launch of a kindergarten to grade 3 Ojibwe bilingual school in 2017. That's amazing. Prior to that, she worked for a number of post-secondary institutes and K-12 school systems, developing strategies both on and off reserve that advance Indigenous achievement. Quite an extensive and impressive bio. And I'm really what I thought we could start off with is a personal touch to our conversation today. And I really would love to talk to you about the issues that we discuss at the Stigma-Free Society. And as you know, myself sharing my story of bipolar disorder, and I would say 95% of our staff also face stigma and also talk about their mental health journeys. And let's talk about yours. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your mental health story, perhaps, and some of the stigma that you have faced, and how have you dealt with those challenges?
Right. Well, I really appreciate, Andrea, that you have created that space, for people to just dig in and talk about stigma, to talk about mental health, mental wellness, and just well-being in general. When I think about my own history or experience with mental health, when I was 19, I dealt with depression. It was considered major depression at the time, and it was quite interesting because it took a while to get to the point of understanding what it was I was experiencing, especially with the healthcare system. There were I think because the depression itself had turned physical, where there was a lot of physical pain attached to it. I can't remember the name of that particular what that's called, but I think for me, what was happening at the time is I was doing a lot of learning about our history as Indigenous peoples, and started to really understand how they have that history and the intergenerational trauma was impacting you know, my life, the life of my family and community. And so things started to become apparent. It was almost like turning a light bulb on. And once it's turned on, you can't turn it off. So you have to start dealing with things. And that was at a time when, you know, Aboriginal education wasn't very common within many schools. So I was fortunate. I grew up in the North End, which is the inner city of Winnipeg, high population of Indigenous people. So I went to a school where there was like 95% Indigenous people. And it was the place where there were intentional efforts to start learning about residential school at a time when, you know, other schools weren't going there. So I think that really set me on a journey to really start to learn about myself and my history. And as you know, like with, you know, the 215 and all of the unmarked graves that are, you know, we continue to find across this country. This has had a huge impact on Indigenous peoples across the country. And at that early stage in my life, I think I started to experience an extreme amount of rage along with grief. And I think those two things unexpressed can turn inward and become depression or anger. And so in hindsight, when I look back, I could very well understand why, you know, that sent me into a downward spin into a major depression.
Yeah. And how did you deal with that? Like when you were experiencing those feelings and you recognized this was what was going on for you, what did you do? How did you face that challenge?
Well, that's a story in itself, because after several visits to the hospital or to see doctors, like I said, for me, I actually know the date that I think this depression started for me. It was November 21st, 1991. And on that day, I had this sensation in my legs where, you know, when your legs fall asleep and it's the pins and the needles and you try to get it out. Well, what happened to me is, like, I just remember attending different events. I was actually going to a lot of ceremony at the time too. So I used to work for a local video store called Video 1001. Bought my first car. It was $450. And then I started visiting all of these different places where I knew they were having ceremony, particularly one spot called, it was Hillside Beach. It was called the Strong Earth Mother Lodge. And one of our local elders, Elder Dave Crochane, had created this space, and it was like this cultural revitalization camp that was, you know, emerging without any type of external government support. It was like, you know, there was a commitment to revitalizing culture and identity. And so I gravitated to that and spent time there, connected with people, and started learning a lot about the culture. And I think that, along with learning about the history, is what kind of opened me up to, like, okay, you know, there's something greater here, something more meaningful that's connected to me as an Indigenous woman that was really feeding me on levels that I didn't get in the school system. But when I think about what I was also feeling, like I said, a lot of grief, a lot of rage, and not a whole lot of outlets to talk about those things, right? So I think it started to come out just unexpectedly at times, you know, where I'd have these like outbursts of tears, and I'd be like, where is that coming from? And it, you know, because I think growing up, we teach ourselves, or for some reason we think that crying is weakness. And so we don't want to cry. We want to hold ourselves together and keep composed. But, you know, I'd be driving along in my $450 car, and I'd be like, I'd just start crying. And I'm like, you know, and I couldn't put into context yet, but that was the beginning of it for me. And then I think on November 21st, 1991, I had this sensation in my legs that just wouldn't go away. And so I started going to the doctor, and I'd say, like, I'm feeling really unwell. Like, I'm feeling pain and irritation and agitation in my legs, and it just doesn't want to go away. So that in itself kind of felt like torture. It was like I couldn't sleep. It turned into insomnia, and then I couldn't eat. And I guess over the next several months, it just started to get progressively worse. And so the doctor started sending me to, I guess, different specialists to see, maybe it's arthritis, maybe it's, some type of nerve issue. So I have to say that wasn't very helpful at all. I think at the end of a few months, I was, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. It was, what I was dealing with was potentially lupus. And so they started me on all these different types of medications. And by the end of it all, I must have had at least a dozen medications I was carrying around in my purse. And I'm like, and I wasn't getting any better. I was progressively getting worse, to the point where, this became like really extreme, to the point where like I had probably lost about 50 pounds in 1 month. I couldn't get anything into my system. And when I think about it, I realized that I really just needed to go through a period of mourning and a period of just kind of expressing and letting go of all of that trauma that I was carrying inside of me. And so there was probably about a good month where I cried every single day. And I don't think crying was enough. Like I needed to rage. I needed to just yell and scream and really be upset. And I think that alone did more for me in the end than any medication that I was prescribed by the doctor. And I'm quite okay sharing this experience, because I think it's really important, to talk about the things that impact us and the way in which we work through to try and get back to wellness. And so usually when we think about depression, sometimes people are suicidal in that state. And so I was often asked if I was suicidal, and I said, no, I want to live. I want to live, and I want to live a good life. And during that time, because I was going to schools, like I said, that were that had a high number of Indigenous peoples, we often learned about the stats, right? The statistics, the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in incarceration, in healthcare, in suicide. And so as I was going through this depression and trying to make sense of what was happening to me, at the back of my mind, I was like, I do not want to be one of these statistics. I do not want to die. I want to live, and I want to have a good life. And so I think that was the difference in terms of, being diagnosed with depression, because the healthcare system will kind of take you through a series of questions and understand where you're at, and then how to diagnose. So at first, they weren't able to diagnose it as a depression, and so kind of went through all of these other physical healthcare possibilities. But at the end of it all, it was interesting because, the doctor and the psychologist that I was working with at the time in the hospital, I said, we realize that what you're going through is a major depression, and there's really not much that we can do. And maybe it's time to just start looking, to your own elders or your own like community healing as a way to kind of deal with this. And that was at a critical point, because, when I think about, that point in which I wasn't able to eat, I think it was because, like I said, there was this great amount of grief that I was carrying in everything that I had seen and experienced, not only for me and my family, but in our extended community. The number of deaths that we had seen, the funerals that we'd gone to, because of suicide, because of other tragic related deaths. And it was continuous, so as a young person going back home for these things, it has an impact, but I don't think we were given enough time to grieve one thing and then another thing would happen. So cumulatively, I think for individuals and Indigenous peoples, that's kind of, we're still in that stage of just recovering and trying to move towards places of wellness. But it's so important that we each share our stories and understand like how we've been impacted, because I'm fortunate that I've been able to get through this experience. And it was actually the cultural teachings that I had that helped me work through that and make sense of that. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the work that you're doing to just, help people talk about these things so that we can, move beyond the stigma that's attached to, just identifying or voicing, to people that, yeah, I have a mental illness, or I've had a mental illness, and I've worked through it. And, so there's so much work to do in that space.
Wow. Thank you so much for your authenticity and honesty. Really moving. And I feel it's so important to be forthright with our stories. And I understand when people aren't in the place as well to do that at all or just yet. But I feel like when more of us share our personal stories, it inspires other people to come forward. So thank you so much for that. I feel like they're personally as well too, with the current world stage and what's happening in Canada. Do you feel that this is something I've noticed, like more awareness around Indigenous mental health or intergenerational trauma and some of the experiences that Indigenous people have to deal with? Do you feel like there's more awareness, perhaps lessening the stigma? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think we're in interesting times right now. I think since the Black Lives Matter movement, we're in, I think what a lot of people are calling an era of racial reckoning. And for Indigenous people, that's important, because, I think our experience is unique here in Canada. When we look at things from a lens of colonization, or when we look at things from a lens of residential school or truth and reconciliation, there's a lot of truth that is not understood, or in some cases accepted, that we as Indigenous people across the country continue to deal with intergenerational trauma. You have to recognize that, Canada is still a very young country, just, over 150 years plus. And when we think about the impacts on Indigenous people, residential schools is just one piece of it. It's a sliver of the cumulative experience that we've had within our homeland as Indigenous people. And so I think when you think about it from that lens, that this is our homeland, and yet as Indigenous people, we are at the bottom of the economic ladder, and we're overrepresented in all of these social ills, like overrepresented in mental health, the justice system. So I think those things are telling of a story of the ongoing crisis and the tragedy that we've had to work through as Indigenous people. And we're just at the point collectively as Canadians of really acknowledging why that is. And so I think the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the 215 and the unmarked graves that continue to emerge within our communities across Canada, it can no longer allow us collectively as Canadians to ignore the type of impact that this has had on Indigenous peoples. And when you think of things, when we look at things statistically, 1 in 5 Canadians will experience some type of mental health within their lifetime, whereas for Indigenous people, it's 1 in 3. And it's these types of things that we need to look at, just displacement, within our own homeland. And really, this is the place where we should stand tall, feel proud, and live with confidence and prosperity. But that's not happening, and it's because of the ongoing things that we continue to deal with. Whether it's our missing and murdered Indigenous women, the intergenerational effects of residential school, and the ongoing, marginalization or the racism that our people continue to experience on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. One of the biggest reasons I wanted to bring you here today is to talk about these issues. I feel at Stigma-Free Society, we have a lot to learn about Indigenous issues and culture, and as you mentioned, racism. And we want to engage as many people as possible to bring this conversation forward. So thank you for that. And we also have partnered with We Matter, a youth Indigenous mental health organization in British Columbia. So we are learning, and we're really reaching out in an attempt to bring awareness to all these issues. So thank you. And I was wondering, could you share a little bit, like I mentioned, you work for Indspire, and I was wondering, could you share with people, like, what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Programs and Student Success at Inspire. So I've been here since January 4th. Um, so I oversee the Building Brighter Futures, which is the awards and scholarship disbursement to Indigenous students across the country. We also have our research arm. It's called the Research and Impact Unit. So we're really starting to identify, I guess, illuminate the type of impact Inspire has had over the years. Which is huge. We've actually funded over 45,000 Indigenous students since Inspire was first launched. That's an incredible number of students. And then we also have our Rivers to Success program. So Rivers to Success is a national Indigenous youth mentorship program. It has 3 streams. It has a high school stream, a post-secondary, and a career transition stream. So our North Star is, we want to ensure that every Indigenous student graduates or has the opportunity to access post-secondary and pursue their career aspirations. We know that, financial, funding that is the biggest barrier for Indigenous people because, like I said, we continue to face huge challenges. And, particularly when we look at our First Nations communities, some of which continue to experience third world living conditions, and by that, I mean lack of clean drinkable water or, the housing issue that we're seeing across our communities. It really makes it difficult to prioritize post-secondary if your family doesn't have the financial needs to support that. So this is a plug for Inspire. Like if people are looking for a place to donate, we do have an excellent matching program here as well. So that's some of the things that we do at Inspire as a part of my portfolio. But we also run the national. It used to be called the National Indigenous Awards. It's an annual event. So we host a number of events like that, Inspire Awards. We host an Indigenous youth gathering called Soaring. It gives students an opportunity to explore their career aspirations. We also host another national gathering for Indigenous education. So that's coming up in the fall. If people are interested, they can look online and either look to present something or attend. But yeah, so Inspire offers just a suite of supports. We are a national charity first and foremost, but we do have that program, that education and research arm at Inspire as well.
So where can people donate again?
So they can visit Inspire. .ca and make a connection there, or they can make a connection to Cindy Ball, who is our Vice President of Development. So Cindy is fantastic at her relation with external partners on this front, and they can either get in touch with Cindy Ball or myself, and we can discuss the ways in which we might support Indigenous students.
Okay, and we'll definitely put your link, of course, in our YouTube channel and Facebook Live so people know where to go. And I was just curious as well, like, how do young people access your programs? I know they would possibly just go to your website, but is there any kind of guidance you can give around that?
Absolutely. So we do have our Building Brighter Futures staff who work directly with students who are interested in applying for awards and bursaries. So to get started, students can look online and click on our application process. That automatically prompts somebody to connect with or to see where individuals are at with their application process. So they'll start connecting either, through email or, at times make calls out to people as well. So that's one of the ways for students that are looking for financial support. For other students who might be looking for mentorship, either at the high school, the post-secondary, or the career transition stage, I would recommend that they click onto our Rivers to Success site. It's in the Inspire.ca portal as well. there's an opportunity to connect one-on-one with a mentor, or to engage in cohort activities as well. So what's interesting about this, about our mentorship program is there is nothing like it that exists. And it creates the opportunity for a broad national network for Indigenous students to connect in areas of interest. Some of the events we host, or might host in the future, may be based on geography. It might be industry specific, it might be program specific. So there's a lot of opportunity to really dig in and get to know, familiarize yourself with all of the opportunities that are out there. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So what we're trying to do is just illuminate all of the opportunities for Indigenous students, but at the same time, support them in a walk beside approach through our mentorship program.
What does the mentorship program look like? I'm so curious. I know that mentors are so important in helping us guide our career goals or our educational endeavors. Dave Richardson is a mentor of mine, as is Haroon Rashid. I have mentors in my life that I feel they're so imperative. And so what does the mentorship program look like? I'm just curious.
So what happens is students get online and there's an application process. So they'll ask a series of questions, interest, programs of interest, just some demographic information. And we also have mentors who apply online, and they fill out an application process as well, identifying, the career sector they're working in. And so our program, we use Mentor City as the platform to engage students in the mentoring program. And so the system itself will match students up based on the answers that they provided through the application process. So that's the first step. The second step is we actually have people in each stream that create the resources and events that actually bring people together. So that's another layer that ensures that there's face-to-face contact. Because we've been in a pandemic over the last couple of years, there haven't been any in-person events, but we've had very successful online events where we've engaged students and mentors and mentees from across the country.
Amazing. I know we had to move all our programming online too, and this has been quite a very pivotal time for people and organizations. I'm very happy to know that your programs are continuing, making them successful, and continuing to have that amazing impact for Indigenous youth. So that is awesome. So I'm going to close up, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share perhaps an inspirational message or any wisdom or words for, I was going to say all the topics we covered today, or particularly what about our Indigenous youth, or anything you would like to close off with.
I think I just want to send a message of hope in that, I think about some of the cultural teachings that I've had over the years, particularly some of the songs that I've learned. And I think about the turtle song. When I think about the turtle song, it talks about the turtle and the way in which the turtle moves. But it's also a song that reminds us, that we often go through these cycles of just like the seasons, So when I think about the challenges that we might go through as Indigenous people or people in general, it's really important to build that support network, but to really connect things that bring meaning to you, that help fill you up in a good way, to find those places that nurture you, that support you. And sometimes that's not always within your immediate space, meaning within your immediate family. There are resources and supports outside, like, the Stigma-Free Society is a good example of that, but all of the other supports that are available. And when you think about support networks and our families and our communities, we're still at the stage of rebuilding, so rebuilding, looking to create healthy families, restore traditions, and ensure that we're all working towards wellness. So I guess with that, I just hope that, you know, everybody that's listening today, that you do find the things that you need to support you in your own life journey. And sometimes we don't know what that is, but just always trust your instincts. And yeah, I guess with that, I don't know. I feel like I could go on and say so much more, but I'm just going to leave it at that. You know, the turn is slow, but he's never at a standstill. You know, sometimes we feel stuck, but we really aren't, because that's life. It just keeps moving, and sometimes we feel stuck, but really things continue to move forward. So just
Exactly.
yeah.
Thank you for that amazing metaphor. I like that. And I'm going to try, and you're going to have to send me that song.
And for you someday.
Yeah. And sometimes, yeah, it does feel like we're stuck and, you know, but we are moving forward and there is hope. And I really appreciate those messages. It really aligns with our messaging here at Stigma-Free. And it's been an absolute honor to be talking with you today. And I was hoping you could stay on the line, as I'd like to thank you personally after this broadcast is finished. And just want to say thank you to our Stigma-Free community and everybody who supports us. And I really love if you did visit Rebecca's Indspire. It's INDSPIRE.ca. And please check out her organization's website, and people can find you all over social media as well. I noticed you have quite a following. So thank you to everybody. Have a lovely day. Thank you, Rebecca. And we will be back in the upcoming weeks as well with more Facebook Lives with Stigma-Free Society. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks.